They say it takes a village to raise a child. I'm Kathryn Ryan, and here we draw on my conversations with experts on 9 to Noon to help you navigate family life. When and how should children learn to write? Is our increasing use of touchscreen technology leading to a generation of kids who don't know how to hold a pencil, let alone write with one? Educator, researcher and parenting commentator Nathan Mikaere-Wallis says there's no rush. Nathan, kia ora, welcome.
Kia ora, Kathryn, how are you?
Good, thank you. Good to talk. No rush meaning what? That you're not going to have a huge advantage if you've got a reading, writing child heading off to school. What do we know about what matters when?
We know that, it comes from lots of different areas of research. We look at longitudinal studies, we look at brain development and how the brain grows neurosequentially. But basically we know that under the age of 7, the child's got to build up brains 1, 2 and 3. And so most children in early childhood have to build up the limbic system, the emotional brain. The literature calls that the social emotional attitudes to learning. In this plain language, what it means is a child has to learn to love learning before he does the formalised learning. And so that's usually between the ages of 2 and 7. So yeah, there is no need to be doing formalised writing in early childhood centres. It would actually be, pretty detrimental.
You're wary of too much formalised anything in early childhood centres. This is a time for creativity. This is a time for learning through play.
Yeah, because I just want to be like Scandinavian countries and countries that actually put the research into practice. It's not, just my opinion that we shouldn't be doing that in early childhood centres. There's clear longitudinal research-based evidence that there is no... even within primary school, the child only benefits from 2.5 hours a day of teacher-led instruction. That's why Finland, reduced to that when they went from the middle of the PISA table to the top. They were at the middle of the international standard, Finland, and they moved right up to the very top by implementing the research. One of the things they did was to recognise that research, that even in primary school, only 2.5 hours a day is... anything more than that doesn't do any difference. So in early childhood, under the age of 6, the numbers are 0. And actually, you shouldn't have any teacher-led interaction. The teachers should be scaffolding the child-led play.
Let's look specifically, though, at the sort of dexterity and the physical experience of writing, drawing,
Yes.
finger painting, whatever. Is it true that children are arriving at school with underdeveloped hand muscles because they haven't practiced their finger grip at home as much as previous generations?
I don't know if that's true or not. I can certainly see the concern with the iPads, but I don't think I don't think a lot of children have turned up to school already been able to write their name and stuff. I don't think it's iPads that have caused that. I couldn't write my name when I got to school. Most boys I know don't show a lot of interest in writing until sort of after 7. So, yeah, I think they're two separate issues. I think there's an issue about iPads and that children are too overexposed to iPads. But I think motor skills in early childhood centres, they are still doing finger painting and, finger puppets and doing up zips is one of the things they talked about in the media, that kids can't do up zips. But they've always been doing that sort of stuff in early childhood centres.
So you're wary of anecdotal reports about this and again looking for research and detail on it. Also I'm interested because that holding of the pencil and that very meticulous how do I do an A and I do a round and then I do a stick, we associate that, we've always associated it more with school than
That's
prior
right.
to school.
Because we associate it with the frontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that likes repetitive pattern. It's it is the part of our higher intelligence. I think that's why parents want to get straight there. But you can't just line up 9-month-old babies at desks and give them pencils. It's not going to be beneficial. So I can understand why people really like that cortex, but you move into that part of your brain when you're 7. And if you try and do that at 3, 4, 5 and 6, you're really just neglecting the actual needs of a 3, 4, 5 and 6-year-old and showing no understanding of how that development really takes place.
So far, though, do we have any evidence about fine motor skills in general, tying up shoelaces or doing zips or, holding a crayon, I don't know, colouring in, anything? Is there any evidence that children are arriving at school less skilled because I presume the presumption here is that they're better at swiping things than much else?
Yeah.
Any evidence?
Not that I'm aware of, Kathryn. It doesn't mean there isn't. It just means I'm not aware of it. But there's, children go to early childhood centres. The majority of children go to early childhood centres. And most early childhood centres may use iPads, but they're usually in a very restricted way. So the majority of the time, the children are still holding a paintbrush, and they are still using their fine finger skills to build Lego.
Or blocks or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's look, quite apart from the perennial question of what is the impact of the digital world on children, let's look at what we do know and have always known about being able to write and when.
Yep.
Perhaps some children will come to school ready to, or already reading. Is it that? Has it ever been that common for children to turn up ready to write?
There's always a group of children that do. We've talked about sort of the advantage of being a female and being a firstborn in terms of your brain growth. So firstborn females, you might get a larger group of them turning up to school at 5 that are really developmentally 7 because they've got those advantages. And there's always children that want to please their parents. So if parents are showing that we're not very impressed with your imaginary friend, but we get all excited when you write your name, then the child will start to try and write their name. That doesn't mean it's self-motivated, but I'm aware that I don't value that stuff until after 7. I want free play, creativity, child-led. That's what I know is going to make for an intelligent child. But my own youngest daughter at 3.5 asked me to download worksheets from the internet because she wanted to write things down because she'd seen her older brothers and sisters doing it, and she'd worked out that the rest of society thinks that you're really flash when you can do that.
So she was leading it, and it was fun and imagination.
Yeah, but I think she was leading it because adults say things to her as a 3-year-old like, and do you know how to write your name? So I think it's the expectation and wanting to please. If the kid doesn't have the wanting to please the adults, I don't see very many of those children wanting to write.
Correlation with future success for those who are precocious is the word, isn't it? For those who are early writers, is there any correlation with future success?
Absolutely none. Absolutely none. Any of those cognitive skills that you do, that we associate with the frontal cortex of literacy and numeracy, those formalised things, there's no evidence that what they call early cognitive attainment, learning those things early, has any benefit. Most of the time, the literature plateaus by 8. So that means that the kid's doing reading and writing at 3. By the time he's 8, he's got the same reading age as the 8-year-old beside him who didn't start until he was 7. So there is no long-term advantage. If there was a long-term advantage, it would be in our early childhood curriculum. Our early childhood curriculum in New Zealand is very research-based and evidence-based. There's a reason why writing is not in there.
Well, I was going to ask you that next, because part of the concern has been around the formalising of that preschool experience. We've gone from kindies, half day at kindy, to all day, not kindies yet, but all day options elsewhere. And now this idea of raising the qualification level of early childhood teachers, which is fine as long as you're not turning them into middle primary school teachers.
Right.
So are we seeing any change to the curriculum that concerns you, or by and large are they still on track in early childhood education?
I think, there is a tension at the moment. There is like half of the sector is saying play-based, this is what we've been taught in, this is what the last 300 years of education have said, this is what Piaget said, the whole father of the Western education system. But then, you have this increasing top-down approach of people thinking that you've got to learn formalised literacy and numeracy early. And a lot of parents believe that because they don't understand how the brain works. So they really just take the naive assumption that the earlier you're reading and writing, the better off you'll be for the rest of your life. So, I think we're trending the other way. I think we've made it that you don't have to start school till you're 6. I think that's going to protect a lot of boys who aren't the firstborn, because then there won't be that pressure put on until they're 6. I'm seeing lots of schools turn to a play-based curriculum because they're getting more and more research-informed. We have Google in our lounge now, so more and more people are research-informed. And when you look at that research, it is very, very clear that all of the advantages under the age of 7 are about social-emotional, child-led, child-initiated.
You mentioned Finland, which is so often the goody two-shoes in these things.
Yes, it is.
I'm not sure why. I don't know whether it's the perfect size or it has it's got high taxes there, hasn't it? Which suggests there's a reasonably sort of focused bureaucracy. So if it gets its research right, there's a good result. But where else would you look? What other systems would you look to say, yep, they're getting it right?
I think just in general, right across Scandinavian countries, you'll see that they implement what the rest of us know in research. Oral language development comes before written language development. You can't expect a child to express himself in written form when he can't yet express himself in orally. So you and I, when we went to school, Kathryn, would stand up and give our news for the day. This is my news. There's always been an emphasis on oral language first. So in most Scandinavian countries, children aren't taught to write until after the age of 7. They're allowed to write before then, but there is no formalisation comes in. So the kid makes up his own language. He makes up his own symbols. The importance is that when he takes that bit of paper up the front, he knows what it means because the emphasis is on reading it out and developing oral language. A good solid basis in oral language is what leads to a good base for writing.
You've talked about girls having a bit of the advantage here in the early years. Once you do get writing, you are introducing it. As you said, you would like the focus to be around 7, but I think they're at it much earlier than that in primary school.
Much earlier.
What is it to be aware of there again? When is it going well? When is it not going well? And when do you start to worry, if at all?
About things like the development of writing and that not showing up.
The old heavy... I was a heavy presser. My memory of learning to write was, don't press so hard.
Right,
I'm trying hard. That's why I'm pressing hard, and you're stressing me out. That's why I'm pressing hard.
Yeah, and that's not ideal, really. We don't want you stressing out when you're learning that because...
Unfortunate flashback to 5, wasn't it?
Right, yeah. But then that little 5-year-old is under this extreme pressure and anxiety. We've got to put that in context of we're a country that has soaring rates of anxiety and depression for our children.
I won't hear a word against Mrs. Lennon. But anyway, right, you're going through a stressful thing. But what is it that's important about the development of early writing skills?
I think we want to see that stuff around the age of 7 because you're in your frontal cortex and those fine motor skills are important. So I do like to see that writing around 7. And children leading their own sort of... Because it's not writing isn't bad under the age of 7, it's the formal teaching of it. Children in early childhood get all these pre-literacy behaviours. When we decide we're building a spaceship to go to Mars and we need a list of who's going first, so I put a bit of driftwood there to say, right, that's me first, right, Kathryn, you're this yellow peg, so you get to go second. That's the development of literacy that's child-led. So literacy and numeracy is rich in early childhood, it's just the formalised teaching of it that we wouldn't start until 7.
Inability to write on the line. I had a problem with that as well. Wait till shorthand came in.
It's just bad if a 5-year-old is stressing out about their learning because at 5 you're developing your emotional attitude towards yourself as a learner. Am I a bit stupid or am I pretty clever when I persist? And a child under stress is basically learning they're a bit stupid. So we should be avoiding stress for 5-year-olds. It's
interesting what good writing is, isn't it? Because there's the content, there's the actual physical appearance of it, which may depend on artistic flair or lack thereof. It's a whole subject I'm getting interested in now. I'm thinking I might do a separate interview on it. But really, as you said, the point of this is to be able to understand and communicate using shared symbols. And is that really what you were looking for more than anything else? More than how heavy something is or whether they're going over the line?
And that's very appropriate for a 7-year-old. And their frontal cortex is looking at all those repetitive patterns that literacy has.
Here's an email for us. I started off on this track, the differences between boys and girls sometimes. Hi, I have a 7-year-old son who's left-handed. Are there any particular ways of learning to write when one is left-handed and learning to write? My wife and I are both right-handed. Apart from the slant, I'm not sure that's a factor. Is there any significant difference? People making a fuss possibly would be the risk, wouldn't it?
Yeah, there's always been. There's an article on Stuff Today, actually, about left-handers having all these advantages and... with the way the left brain controls the right-hand side of the body and vice versa. So the right-hand side of the brain is, I don't want to oversimplify it, but it is a wee bit more associated with creativity. So I can imagine that a left-hand person is using more of the right-hand brain, so might be better at problem solving.
I wonder if technically there's a difference, though.
Not really. It's just all brains are asymmetrical, and whether you do that, most human beings do it to the left side. Not that correlates with left and right-handedness, but in answer to her question, what do they have to do? They have to let the child find his own way, and they need to listen to him to find out how he wants to write, and how, because he's a left-handed person, so they should really listen to him about how a left-handed person needs to write. He'll work it out himself.
Is it similar to many other things that we've talked about in the early stages of developing a skill, that actually your attitude towards it and your sense of competence around it is what matters, not whether it's perfect right now or ever going to be perfect? I mean, some of the brainiest people whose stuff you read, you look at their handwriting and you go...
Yeah, that's right. No one's going to...
How did you get through Primer 2?
Yeah.
So again, it's about encouraging confidence and an enjoyment of the practice.
Yeah.
A lot of debate around pencil grip. Again, you get variations. You have the conventional grip, but you get people have variations and put the index finger somewhere unusual. Does it matter terribly?
There is a whole body of evidence about, when you look at evolutionary theory, that they reckon the reason why we have higher rates of depression now than in the Great Depression is because a lot of our joy centres are connected to our hands and our fingers, because throughout evolutionary time we've worked a lot with our hands. So now as we use our hands less and less, there's less and less of those positive endorphins and stuff released into the brain. So I'm just trying to relate that to, I do think human beings need to be really using those fine motor skills, but they can be equally used in weaving and kapa haka and, like you said, finger painting. And but yeah, I wouldn't want to see us lose writing.
Well, that is the point I was going to come to. Everyone should go and look up Frank Howarth, by the way. He's just that beautiful craft of furniture. We've got videos and audio of him, and that was a big part of what he talked about, the physical, tactile pleasure of working with your hands.
Yes.
But staying with writing, I guess another issue is going to be, now we're migrating exams online and migrating them onto, I guess, iPads.
Yep.
Is there a link between the learning that happens when you read something and write notes about it or write about it? So in other words, it goes into that brain, gets processed, comes out through your hand and onto a page. Is there an indication that either learning or memorisation or fact retention is advantaged by the practice of handwriting? And is that any different from the practice of typing into a laptop?
Yeah, there's very scanty evidence on that I've ever come across. I would imagine that there is a little bit, it's that evolution stuff again. The brain's evolved writing, so you probably engage a whole lot more of your brain to write down your notes than you do to simply touch type. But I think a whole lot of it would just come down to individual preference and the individual learner style. I can't take notes. I was never been able to take notes in a lecture theatre because then I wasn't really listening. If I needed to attend and listen, so writing notes distracted me.
That's really interesting. So again, it's individual. For some people, the act of handwriting is almost reinforcing because you hear the information and then you write the information, so you sort of double treated it. But interestingly for you, having to write it was a distraction to listening to it.
Yeah, because I didn't then think about the information and I didn't integrate it into what I already knew, because I was just doing this surface procedure of writing down the notes. So it was good to be able to regurgitate back what the lecturer said, but it wasn't really good for comprehension and understanding and fully absorbing.
Interesting stuff, as it is always. Thank you for your time.
Cheers, Kathryn. Good to talk to you.
Nathan Mikaere-Wallis, educator, researcher and parenting commentator.